So let's go take a look at how you actually start a web project, specifically how you start with the planning phase of building a website. So one of the most important things to remember is that developing websites is a lot more than about technology. A good website starts with some planning effort, where you figure out exactly what content you want to have on your website and how you allocate that content to pages. Just simply starting up your favorite web development tool like Weebly and then just putting content and copy and images and videos on your homepage is not going to be good enough. You're going to have to figure out how you're going to distribute the content over the pages so that users can find what they're looking for. You allow them to navigate to the website in a straightforward manner, and always keep in mind that some of your users are going to visit the website from a mobile device, and they may not necessarily have a large screen. So allocating the content properly makes your website a lot more usable. Now, what you ultimately arrive at when you allocate your content over the different pages is your information architecture. There are a number of techniques that we can use to help us plan our content and build the information architecture. There is card sorting, there is content inventories, there's paper and sketchboards and other types of mockups, and there are map site diagrams. Now, some help us with the planning of the website before we start building. Some help us with planning some of the maintenance of the website after we are done building the website. But regardless what you do, the first thing you need to always do as part of any planning effort is understand your user. You need to think about who exactly you have in mind as an audience for your website. Who's going to be visiting your website and what do they want to do while they're there? Or they're trying to find an address, or they're trying to order a product, or they're trying to get in touch with you, or they're trying to return something. You got to think about what different uses different visitors have for your website. We call these use cases. They're different cases in which your website is being used for a specific purpose by a visitor. You need to know who wants to do what with your website. Now, one of the most straightforward techniques to help you understand and analyze your users and what they want is use cases and use case analysis. Now, it's often very helpful to define your use cases initially as mini stories. And you often write them in the format as you describe the user, I want to describe the goal of that user, so that, and then you describe the purpose. For example, for boat ventures, a possible use case could be, as a charter guest who has booked a charter, I want to get directions to the marina so that I know where to find my charter boat and can depart on time. So based on that, you know who your potential user is. That's a charter guest who has booked the charter already, and what they want to be able to do. They want to find directions to the marina. So given that that is what one of your users wants to do, you better have on your website directions to your marina, and you better have a convenient way for your charter guests who have booked charters to find directions to the marina. You got to think about that as something they want to do, that's something that they want to find, so make it convenient for them to find it. So the use cases ultimately help you define what content you need on your website and how you're going to allocate the content over pages. Now, there's a technique that can help you do that initially. So you may want to start by simply brainstorming all of the different users that you think might visit your website and all the different use cases you can think of. And keep in mind, you're probably going to forget a few of them, and that's okay as long as you don't forget any major ones. But you start out by figuring who's going to use your site and what they want to do with it. And then you're going to start creating your information architecture. You start out by creating a card, let's say an index card or a sheet of paper for each page that you think you're going to need for your site. And you're going to write down on that page or on that card what information you think should go on that page. You don't have to draw a diagram of the website. You don't have to draw a design for the web page. You just want to write down, even in bullet points, what you think you're going to put on that page. And then if you have hierarchies of your pages, you want to organize the cards into stacks. So if you have any kind of menu or navigational aspect to your website, organize your cards into stacks. Once you're done with that, you can build a page flow diagram to exactly determine how a user gets from one page to another and how they can kind of navigate through the site. And that, of course, eventually means that you're going to have buttons on the various pages to allow them to go from one page to another. So here's what card sorting might look like in practice. So there is some kind of a find page, a services page, a special collections page, and an about page, and then a define page. The website architect decided to put on the books and media, articles, journal titles, course reserves, and maybe find by citation. The services page is going to include give to the libraries, access and borrow materials, borrowing, and dissertations and theses, and so on. But the point basically is that this gives you an example of sorting information into stacks to help you understand information architecture. Now, once you've done your page design, and once you start actually building your pages in your web development tool like Weebly, you want to keep track of what's where. Specifically, if you have external links that you are tracking and external links that contain content to pages outside your site, you want to know exactly what external links you have, because you need to keep track to make sure that external links are valid. In fact, it's not unusual that external links go stale. I've had that happen many times where I link to external content only to find out when I teach a course the next semester that the content's been moved, migrated, deleted, maybe protected. So it's important that you know exactly what external links, what content you have in your pages, and that you go to that content periodically to make sure it's still there. So a content inventory is really nothing more than a spreadsheet, even just an Excel spreadsheet perhaps, of all your pages, the page hierarchy, and the file names, along with what is on each page, including external links to resources outside your website. Now, this is very good for tracking. It's not great for planning. Card sorting really helps you plan, but the content inventory concept really helps you track once you've built everything. Now, typically you want to, track in your content inventory your, titles of pages, URLs to the page. If it's, a particular file, obviously most of it's going to be HTML, but some of your pages might be PDFs or Word documents, maybe an author if different people are authoring pages, maybe the actual location of the file if it's different than the URL, dates for creation, revision, access, and so on. Here's a simple example of that. Shows you the different pages for a website and the different paths to where the file is located. Now, once you actually start building your pages, again, it's probably not a great idea to go directly and jump directly into Weebly and start banging out your pages. But it might make some sense to sit down first and map out your page content. If you decide, based on your card sorting exercise and use cases, that you're going to have 5 different elements or 5 different information items on your page, well, you might want to take a few minutes and lay out where it's going to be. Are they kind of, structured in a particular way? Is one after the other? Are you going to have some frames, some borders, some tables? And you might want to even do a little bit of a sketch of the page. So you can do this, just with, pencil and paper, or maybe put them up on a whiteboard. Or if you like, and you're going to modify them over time, you could even use a computer application like Balsamic, Lucidchart, Glyphy, Visio, Creately, Cuckoo. There's a number of different tools out there that you can use to sketch your pages before you build them. It's actually particularly useful if you have a client for whom you're developing a website. Before you invest a lot of time in constructing a website and writing code, you might want to just show the client a a sketch of the page and say, hey, this is what I'm kind of thinking about, how I'm going to lay out the yachts that we have for charter. Here's where I'm going to put a picture over here, description, I'm going to have a button over here, and kind of just, sort of lay out the page a little bit for that person and say, hey, what do you think? And they can say, well, I like this, I don't like that, can we move this over here, can we move that there? And then based on the feedback, you might build another sketch until you eventually have agreed on how the content is going to be laid out. And then you spend the time crafting that page in HTML, JavaScript, CSS, and so on. So here's an example of that. Here's an example built in Balsamic where you have a very simple, it's called a wireframe mockup, where you just, show, hey, here's a boat image, here's another image, here's a link, and you just, lay it out. There's actually not a lot of real content. There's no real pictures, no real images. It's just kind of placeholders. Like I said, we call that a wireframe. Although some website designers might actually build very realistic looking mock-ups of pages. But most of the time, really all you need is a simple wireframe that gets the point across, and you kind of communicate to the user what it is you're trying to build. Now, once you have all your pages laid out, you know what information goes in your pages, you have your use cases analyzed, and you know the content that you need, now you're going to have to put everything together. You have to particularly think about the navigation. Let's say somebody wants to book a charter. Where do they start? They go to the landing page, the home page. What do they click on from there? Where do they go to next? And once on that page, what else do they go to? What else can they go to? So it might often help you map out the navigation through the different pages using what's called a sitemap diagram. It helps you visualize page flow. In other words, how users get from one page to another. This will eventually help you detect whether maybe some kind of a use case has too many steps, there are too many page switches, whether you might have pages to which you can go into but can't get back out. I've seen that often the case where, I click on stuff, I get to a particular page, and now I'm kind of stuck there. In fact, I'm thinking one in particular on Amazon. If you go to the order review, you eventually end up in a spot. No, actually, when you try to return something, you eventually end up with printing a return label, and then you can't go back to where you were. There's no back button. Somebody forgot to put a back button on there. So that, of course, means you have a dead end. It means you went to a page, but you can't get out of it other than using maybe the browser back button, which you got to be careful about, because if there was a form submission on a previous page, you might inadvertently resubmit the form and maybe place the same order again. That can be a little bit problematic. You could also have orphan pages that nobody links to. You built it, you've designed it, but you forgot to link to it. They could either be on purpose, that you built the page but you no longer want it to be part of the site, or that you have built a page, but you forgot to hook it up to some of the other pages, that they were supposed to navigate to that one. Again, you can build the sitemap diagram with a tool like Lucidchart or Visio, or you can sketch it by hand and just draw it on a whiteboard, take a picture with your camera, or draw it on a piece of paper and take a picture or scan it. But here's an example of what that might look like. And this is an example of a site that has couple dozen pages. Let's say you have the About Us page. So here's your home page right here. Right from the home page, you can go to the ICDL page and you can go back. There's a two-way arrow, so you can go forward and backward. From ICDL, you can go look at the bottom toolbar. From the bottom toolbar, you can get to the About Us page, to the sitemap page, and so on. By the way, notice you can get to those pages. You can't navigate back to the bottom toolbar. That makes sense, because once you're there, you want to be able to, link back to something else. Although I would look at this and say, hey, how do you get back to home? How do you get back to all these? You really want to think about making sure that your navigation is consistent, it's straightforward, it's intuitive, and that it overall just makes your website usable. You're probably not going to get it right the first time. So websites are really best built in an iterative fashion, particularly if you have a client. Talk to your client. Don't try to design everything all at once. Maybe focus just on the landing page. Maybe one of your products pages. Maybe a services page. Lay it out. Show it to your client. Get some feedback and then revise. In fact, what you can often do is set aside a time box and say, let's decide on work I'm going to do for the next week. Then build it for a week and then show your client. Get some feedback, and then based on the feedback, based on what else your client wants, decide what you're going to do for the next week of work. And you keep doing this over and over again in time boxes of 1 or 2 weeks until eventually a client says, yeah, this is a good site. This is what I want. Let's go live. Or, more likely, the client runs out of money and says, you know what? This is good enough. I got enough. I paid enough. I'm happy with what I have. Let's deploy it. Once it makes some money, we can go back and make further revisions. It's a very iterative approach, and you incrementally build a site, not all at once, but piece by piece. When you're done building your site, or you have, built a couple of weeks worth of work, you got to test your design, you got to test your website. Either you or maybe somebody else that you hire for that purpose has to go through every single page and check all the links. Do they all work? Can the user get to all the information that they need? In other words, look back at the use cases. If there was a use case that said, hey, one of my customers should be able to find directions to the marina where the boat departs from, can they do that? How would they do that? Is everything accessible? Is everything readable? Is all the information there? In other words, test to see if the information that they need is present on the various pages. How long does it take them to get a common task done? If you're trying to get them to book a charter, how many steps do they have to go through? How long does it take on average? Can you run a little study where you invite, half a dozen or a dozen people in to go do some common tasks and time them? Does it take too long? What feedback do you get? Do they have to go through too many pages? Is it easy to find stuff? Do they make a lot of mistakes? In which case you might want to observe the users and then fix that. Fix the design, update the design, change your instructions, change your buttons, make it easy for the user to navigate through your website. Now, as part of your evaluation, check to see how many mistakes people are making, or how often they kind of click on the wrong button and get into a dead end. If it's not easy for them to complete a task, your website's too complicated. Simplify it. So bottom line is, before you start hacking away in your favorite web development tool, you got to take some time and design your website. Understand your user, figure out who they are, determine the use cases, lay out your content using card sorting, build a site map diagram to help you navigate through the different pages, build mockups or wireframes where needed, and then eventually track everything in content inventory. And above all, don't forget to test before you release your website.